Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is an enormous pleasure, as always, to be here at the Future for Nature Awards. This is our 16th award event, which, again, is an incredibly special day. It's a great pleasure, of course, to welcome our guest of honor, Pavan Sukhdev, and our wonderful winners for this year. We have Tomás Rivas Fuenzalida from Chile, Pieter van Wyk from South Africa, and Alona Prylutska from Ukraine. Well, it really is quite hard to believe that 16 years have passed since I first arrived in Arnhem, quaking like a leaf to present the first ever Future for Nature Awards. And, since then we've celebrated 45 extraordinary young conservationists from vastly different cultures and backgrounds, and to whose ranks today we are adding another 3 exceptional young people. What I didn't know back then, what none of us knew back then, was how Future for Nature was going to evolve, rather like those wonderful subterranean symbiotic fungal networks that connects all the trees in a forest underground, bringing nutrients to the roots and flourishing and nourishing all of the other trees in the forest. And that's really what's happened here, this sort of synergistic alliance that has developed that we now call the Future for Nature family. Well, as this family evolved over time, I think what really struck me time and again was the courage and the strength that the laureates are able to draw from this growing network, sharing their experiences, their expertise, their friendship, and their connections with one another, and finding within this Future for Nature community people that they can trust implicitly, who really understand the hardships and the isolation of being out there on a limb, all on your own, fighting for endangered species. Well, a lot has changed in the last 16 years, as we all know. Another 1 billion people have been added to this planet, including my own children. The impact of humanity's growing footprint is setting terrifying new records every single day. And we're all feeling the impact. It doesn't matter where you look, whether it's plastic pollution, what we call the economies of despair, climate heating, or the appalling loss of biodiversity that we all know about. Last year was particularly hard for us in North Kenya, after 3 years of intense drought that affected the whole of the Horn of Africa. There was a lot of death that was caused by hunger. But this last December, we began losing some very special friends for reasons that weren't death. They were all elephants, and there was one in particular that hit very hard, who was just too clever, too strategic, and too healthy to die so young. His name was Sarara, and he was one of our most important ambassadors in North Kenya, a giant who kept us company all hours of day and night, claiming our camp in Samburu as his own, and really enchanting every single person that he came across. He was so confident of his place in the world that he felt completely comfortable just falling asleep right there in amongst us, snoring quietly next to us and dreaming his elephant dreams under the stars. My children grew up knowing him as their most impressive and feisty neighbor, never afraid to tell us when he thought we'd got out of line. But I think what made him exceptional, and this really came from his charismatic character, was that he changed how people thought. Whether it was reconfiguring the understanding that the nomadic people have of elephant and promoting peaceful coexistence, or inspiring people from all around the world to take action in the conservation cause simply from having met him once. In the months leading up to his death, we started to see the battle lines hardening in human-wildlife conflict, driven by this terrible drought, as people and animals were pushed to the very edge of existence. Areas that used to be safe for elephants were suddenly awash with exhausted nomads armed with guns. And access to water became the single most potent catalyst for conflict. Zarara wasn't killed because of his ivory or for meat. It wasn't even about water. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, faced with the caustic intolerance of armed men herding malnourished livestock right at the end of the line. And it was so unnecessary. It was such a terrible waste of a beautiful life. Well, ugly, pointless deaths like this are happening all over the world all the time to plants and animal species as the needs of people crush up against the wild environment. And while humans are the cause of most of this conflict, we are also the best source of potential strategies for coexistence. And that is a choice that we, as an intelligent species, can make. Making a decision to improve our own future by sharing our landscapes and our resources with wild creatures and plants. Encouraging us in a way to move towards a higher, more elevated type of civilization. And it's really this choice, I think, that unites all of our laureates within Future for Nature, wherever they are in the world, promoting peaceful coexistence. So I am enormously excited and honored that again today we get to celebrate these young people and their achievements right on the eve of Earth Day, which is happening tomorrow. And it's really thanks, as always, to the generosity of our incredible sponsors of this event. First and foremost, Burger Zoo and the Burger Zoo Conservation Foundation, whose continued support has really allowed Future for Nature to grow into this incredible organization that it is today. Then there's Fundación Segre, the Fred Foundation, the Royal Van Wyk Paint Company, the Foundation Nuva Vada, all of whom we owe an enormous debt of gratitude. And of course, last but not least, the enormous energy and effort that has gone into making this event possible from the Future for Nature team, all of its allies, and the many wonderful volunteers. Thank you all so much. Well, now we're doing something a little different this year. And we're going to take you on a journey into the wild to visit some of the places that our family in Future for Nature has been working so hard, and to help you meet also the winners in their environments to see what it is they're up to. And we're going to begin this journey in South America, in Colombia, with Jose González Maya.
Hello everybody, this is Jose González Maya, a Future for Nature Award winner from 2015, and this is just a quick update on one of my projects, one of the projects that actually the award boosted and provided so much support, which is the Jaguar Friendly Certificate. This is a project in which we use an eco-label, part of the Wildlife Friendly Enterprise Network, to certify production units that contribute to jaguar conservation in critical areas for its conservation in Latin America. Pretty much what we do is to secure habitat and secure better practices, reduce poaching and conflict, and allow jaguars and prey to move around these landscapes. That way, we provide the eco-label, and with that eco-label, these people can sell their products and merchandise their products as jaguar-friendly. This is a way to use market-based economic incentives for conservation and for pretty much securing livelihoods, improving the well-being of wildlife and humans in shared landscapes in Latin America. It's great to say hi, and I hope you have a great time.
Well, now we gallop across the sweeping grasslands to Bolivia to visit Chala Bosma, who's just counted a record number of blue-throated macaws, 228 in total, as they return to their nocturnal roosts. The Barba Azul Nature Reserve, where Chala and his colleagues at Asociación Civil Armonia have been working for the past 7 years, now protects the largest population of these endemic and critically endangered macaws. And this new record that he has just managed to get is a clear indication that this population is now increasing, which is really fantastic news. Well, further south, we join Barbara Galetti and her team from the Cetacean Conservation Center out at sea in the South Pacific Ocean, where they have been looking for blue whales. But on a recent expedition, she bumped unexpectedly into an aggregation of southern right whales that are seldom seen in this area. In fact, in all the years that she has worked there, I think this is the first time that she has ever seen these whales here. Southern right whales can have a breeding interval of up to 21 years. So the presence of a playful, healthy calf in this group was the most wonderful reward. Well, moving inland now, we ride the flight path of a bird of prey soaring across the Andes to the precipitous forests of central Chile, where we meet our first winner of the year, Tomás Rivas Fuenzalida. Now, when I first met Tomás just a few days ago, I was struck by his wonderful predatory aquiline nose and his lofty perspective on the world, like an eagle with infinite patience perched on its crag, observing the scurrying of the world far below. Well, you know, they do say that one takes on the characteristics of the animals you love. I hope I don't look too much like an elephant. Well, one pair of a half of identical twins, Tomás grew up in the foothills of the coastal mountains of southern Chile, where he really loved to go exploring. So he set off one day with his twin brother on an intrepid kayaking mission that took a lot longer than expected. And as the sun hit the horizon and the lake continued, they had this sudden realization that some people were going to be very cross when they got back home, arriving sometime late in the middle of the night, absolutely wet to the bone and frozen solid, with a furious mother waiting to meet them. But this early disrupted mission of his did very little to quell his adventurous spirit, which took off irreversibly one day on the discovery of a nest belonging to a rufous-tailed hawk, a raptor about which almost nothing was known. It turned out that the nest he'd discovered was only the 6th of its kind known in the world, and the previous discovery had taken place during the 1990s. Well, since then, his eagle eyes have spotted another 50 nests for this raptor, and a similar amount for a second raptor called the black and chestnut eagle. Both of these raptors are under acute threat from conflict with people, and both are enormously lucky to have such a dedicated champion uncovering the secrets of their world. Tomás, welcome to the stage.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. First of all, I have to confess that I feel a little strange with this clothing. I cannot remember the last time I dressed like this. But this is a very special occasion, and I am very happy to be here with all of you. So let's start. This is the vast geographic area, almost as big as France, where I have been working for about 17 years studying one of the most fascinating and lesser-known group of predators on Earth, forest raptors. These mythic creatures whose eyes can see everything around them, but hardly anyone can see them because they are the masters of stealth. But for me, they are the true spirits of the forest. And that's probably what fascinates me the most about these animals. But why are these species so unknown? Apart from their secretive behavior, most of these species live in remote places, usually in rugged terrain between steep slopes, mild rivers, and dangerous cliffs, which make his studying a grand challenge. Unveiling the secrets of these animals and protecting them has become in my lifetime goal. I became interested in birds from an early age. No, not so early. But my interest was mostly in trying to kill them in my backyard. Here I am with a gun. Fortunately, my aim was terrible, and so I never managed to hit anything. One day, a group of hummingbirds appears so close to me, I mean this close, that I automatically lowered my slingshot and stayed glued, watching them fly, mesmerized by their iridescent colors. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life. And in that exact moment, I realized that it was much more interesting to observe them than to stone them, by far. Then, suddenly, a new world opened in front of my eyes. Bird life. I began to learn about the different adaptations and lifestyles of each species, some living on the ground level, others in the branches, in the treetops, or up in the open sky. As I raised my sight higher, I noticed there were birds that were much better hunters than what I was. When I saw a kestrel, this little guy, snatch a sparrow in the middle of the air, I was stoned. I was in shock. It is how I discovered raptors, and I consumed everything I found about them. I even made my own raptor toys out of sheets of paper and spent hours playing with them. At that moment, my parents seemed a little worried. This child needs help, they said. Psychological help. But after a while, and seeing that my obsession was only growing, they gave me my first binoculars, so I could see the plumage and behavior in much greater detail. Later, I tried to evolve this passion into a bachelor's in biological sciences, but my constant field trips began to interfere with my academic schedule. So I started thinking, if people like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates dropped out of university and made it, I could do that too. And after many years of hard work and perseverance, they are now multimillionaires, and I am an unemployed bird enthusiast. Just kidding. I never wanted to be a millionaire. My interest was not in having things, but in doing things. However, making a career as a renegade conservationist can be a very difficult task, so I don't recommend it at all. Well, since 2006, and thanks to the support and advice of my mentors, Ricardo Figueroa and Cristian Gonzalez in Chile, I started to study little-known raptors such as the rufous-tailed hawk and the black and chestnut eagle, among many other species, looking especially for his nests. The rufous-tailed hawk is the main aerial top predator of the austral temperate forest of southern Chile and Argentina. It's a vulnerable species and eats mainly other birds such as wild pigeons, quails, chickens, and also rabbits and rats. The black and chestnut eagle is a larger raptor. It can reach about my size in wingspan and lives in the tropical Andes, montane forest from eastern Venezuela to northwestern Argentina. And with this enormous claws, he can eat mainly opossums, monkeys, crassid birds, which are birds like a turkey, and other arboreal vertebrates. When I started to study these species, only a handful of nest locations were known, and information on their natural history was very, very scarce. A pair of these raptors will have about territory about 40 square kilometers, where is only one nest. So they are very hard to find. The key for this is patience, a lot of patience. Watching the sky by hours to see where the bird lands, and then trying taking up and down steep slope to verify them. Since 2006, I have found more than 80 new nests of this species, and together with my colleagues have done the first studies on several aspects of their natural history and discovered new populations for science. Here is my team in Chile, which we were found the Ñanculafquén Foundation, a little non-profit organization which promotes the conservation of raptors and their habitat through environmental education and outreach. And here you have another partner of us working in Peru and Argentina. Now, if you let me, I want to show you something. This is a very rare footage of a mating attempt between two young and black and chestnut eagles. This behavior has never been seen before. So you are very lucky now. Look at that beauty. It's a failed attempt. Well, unfortunately, the rest of the video was censored. But if one of you want to see them, only ask me and we can see later. Although finding many new nesting sites sounds like very good news for this species, we also find that these species have facing many threats. These are not clouds. The forest is burning. Habitat loss estimated over 50 to 60% of the original range, coupled with other threats such as human persecution in retaliation of poultry predation, which represent over 90% of the cause of mortality for juveniles and adults in both species, have decimated his populations, estimated now to be around 1,000 mature individuals for each species. I remember when I was in the western Andes of Ecuador, and a villager told me that he had been waiting for an eagle with his shotgun. And to ambush it, he had tied his lad's chicken by one leg as a trap. Well, the eagle passed by so quickly that the bullet remained inside the gunshot and only the leg of the chicken remained in the place. Solution has to be found. This is how I began to learn about agroecology. In this site, we can see a very open slope where an eagle can very easily hunt a chicken. This is a black and chestnut eagle with a chicken. In this other side, you can see a system that includes fenced pens and corridors to prevent poultry enters in the orchard. Orchard waste feed the chickens, and chicken feces nourish the orchard. This system, designed in Brazil to meet basic food needs and generate microeconomy in poor rural settlements, can be used very successfully to prevent raptors' attack on poultry, since they are always protected by this system. But in the field, things can be different. In many places, I have seen that farmers have not orchard or are unable to keep their poultry protected. In these cases, wide perimeter fences can be used with crops inside that develop enough foliage to protect poultry from attacks by large raptors. And those are only few examples. Currently, my team and I are working and developing new projects to resolve human-raptor conflict through these nature-based solutions. And with the support of the Future for Nature, we will be able to show a large audience that a pacific coexistence between people, and raptors are possible, scaling these projects in Chile, Argentina, and Peru. Working side by side with the local communities, which we hope will develop, will become the main allies for raptor conservation. In the case of the rufous-tailed hawk, we also will develop a pioneering project to reinforce population with captive breed individuals like this one, and reintroduce the species in some areas of central Chile where this beautiful raptor disappeared along about 100 years ago. To finish, I want to thank to the Future for Nature Foundation and Academy for this award, which is very important for me because this work is often poorly recognized in Latin America. So that the fact that our work is being noticed and awarded internationally could help us to have a stronger voice at our region and having a greater power inside to the decision making. I also want to thank to the Burger Zoo for receiving us in this spectacular place. Finally, I like to thank with all my heart to the support I have received during all these years for my family, my friends, my mentors, colleagues, and institutions who have given me the strength to still fighting so that raptors continue flying over our forest. Many thanks.
Thank you, Tomás. Well, bidding farewell to our friends in South America, protecting hummingbirds and jaguars, spider monkeys and sloths, we now follow the ocean trail of whales across the Pacific Ocean and up towards the Lusa ecosystem in Indonesia to join Sumatran rhino champion Rudi Putra in a verdant tropical forest, where I'm going to ask you all now to actually close your eyes and listen to the sounds of gibbons and other creatures in the canopy singing on a rainy afternoon in his forests. Close your eyes. We now jump to Bangladesh, to the Indo-Burma biodiversity hotspot, which borders partly the border with Myanmar, where we find Shahriar Cesar Rahman and his team at the Creative Conservation Alliance, who successfully reintroduced 10 Asian giant tortoises in December 2021 to the Chittagong Hill Tract forest after they had been absent from that forest for 30 years. It's really a great move for the conservation of this critically endangered tortoise, and the team is now monitoring them year-round using GPS trackers and finding that they are really thriving in this wonderful new wild habitat. Well, further to the west, we now go to Iran, where we see Hana Reza and Iraq Hana Reza and Iran Mohammed Faradina, who are both working to save Persian leopards that have no concept of international borders. So Hana and Mohammed have joined forces, supported by Future for Nature Family funding, to monitor these elusive and highly endangered cats in tandem on either side of the border. Hana's team recently set up a whole lot of camera traps in the Karadak Reserve and has been capturing lovely images, including this one of a Persian leopard. And their intention now is to track key individuals from this population to learn how they utilize this largely inaccessible, sometimes very turbulent, transboundary habitat. So departing now from the Pacific Ring of Fire, and all of our friends there protecting tree kangaroos, Amur leopards, sharks, songbirds, pangolins, tigers, and river dolphins. We skim across the waves with loggerhead turtles all the way across the Indian Ocean to southern Africa to meet our next winner, Pieter van Wyk, who was born and raised in the Harib Desert close to the Namibian border, in the most northwestern corner of South Africa. The Harib Desert is one of the oldest deserts in the world. A meeting point of 3 unique biomes, and cut in half by a mountain plateau. This tiny corner of the world is one of the most biodiverse places on Earth. Refreshed by a regular mantle of fog from the Atlantic Ocean that blankets the desert sand, the east of this region is kissed by rain in the summer, while in the west it rains only in the winter. This unusual climate makes the Harib home to well over 4,000 plant taxa, of which about 1,000 species are endemic, and more are being discovered every day. A child of the desert, Pieter was dropped in the veldt with reptiles as his babysitters whenever his parents went to the local town. So he talked to the plants, scuttled in the sand, and absorbed the silence of the desert through his skin. It's why his skin is now decorated with scores of tattoos in honor of the hundreds of plants he's named for science. And maybe it's also why he talks so much, unable ever to outpace that frontier of silence. Pieter won this award for his extraordinary work saving succulents from extinction in the face of impossible, overwhelming threats that are ongoing. But what he actually represents is the soul of an entire ecosystem. So this reward is both for him, but it is also for every other species of flora and fauna that exists in the Harib, because we believe in their future. Pieter, come to the stage.
Ja, the moment has come. Hartlike goeiemiddag. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So I might be known as Pieter, but back in the desert, they call me Oeproep. And when you translate it from the local Nama language, it means mir or and, because I'm always climbing around, I'm always going up the mountains, walking and finding something to keep myself busy. So I would like to share you a little bit. Is this going in the right direction? we used to waiting for things in the desert. That's me in a nutshell. Yeah, I grew up in one of the most spectacular places for me in the world, in the Harib Desert, also known as the Richtersveld. And since a very, very young age, by my mother, my grandmother, as well, the local Nama shepherds of the Richtersveld or the Harib Desert, I've been taught everything about medicinal, edible, as well as superstition uses of plants. Plants has been a huge part of my life and my upbringing. And I'm really, really fortunate to have grown up in such a beautiful part of the world and being supported by my family. Though it looks to the untrained eye, if the Richtersveld or the Harib Desert is without life, a desolated environment, it is teeming in biodiversity. And specifically one form of life, I believe in Dutch, it's called vetplanten, because in Afrikaans we call it vetplante or succulents. It's one of the very unique forms of life that's found in this part of the world where I grew up. And I would like to share you some of the unique species in my area. This is called the gomvygie. So if you translate it, it means glue mesum. And if you look very careful to the leaves of this species, you'll see it's covered full of sand. And there's a very specific reason for this. This is one of many species of plants that are called samophytes found in the Kharib Desert. And what they've learned to do is to form a glue around the leaves and then sand attached to this glue, and it forms a shield against the elements, almost like a human putting on a jacket when you go outside. An absolute special species. I discovered this species in 2013 in a tiny little community in the Richtersveld called Ubus. Ubus means place of God. And because of the community that helps to protect the species, I decided when I described it to name it in honor of the small town of Kubus. And it's now called Drumia kubusensis, meaning Drumia from the Kubus. But there's only 58 of these plants in the world. That's the total population. And this is quite common for the Kharib Desert to have species with such low populations. They are critically endangered. I'm really fortunate with this award that I'm going to be using some of this award money to protect some of the species habitat, and it's also something which the community are supporting and have asked me to help with. So a big shout out to the Future for Nature Foundation. And then another very, very rare species. I mean, when you look at it like that, it doesn't look like much, but when you add a person in a photo. So this is called the Shambok speckworm. It's found in only 3 square kilometer area of the Kharib Desert. And it's an absolute botanical wonder. No one knows why this plant formed this over 4 meter long flowering stem. But a very, very cool species from my area. And then obviously I have to share some of the strange succulents. I mean, even stranger than the succulents are the Afrikaans, or the Afrikaans is very close to Dutch names that people give, like this species. It's called hondebal. So if you translate it, dog testicle. We have other names like Oma's pram, grandmother's breast. And then we've got some species that's called pere something, I can't say the rest, or horse something. It's just absolutely fantastic. It's just absolutely fantastic, the diversity that we have. The one on the right is called catclaw, and I'll just stay with that. These are 2 parasitic, we've got many species of parasite in the areas, but they don't have any chlorophyll at all and live off the roots of poisonous euphorbia plants. And then this is one of my absolute most favorite species. I grew up very close to where the species occur. This is called the vensterplantjie, or window plant. And like many of our species of succulents, it spends about 90% of its existence completely hidden under the sand. But if you look carefully, because I mean living underground is fantastic, from surviving from heat, from wind and the elements. But if you're a plant, you need sunlight. And this plant evolved something very clever. So if you look carefully, I wonder if this thing works. Nope. But I'll show it. So if you look very careful at the leaves, the tips of the leaves are transparent. And this plant has evolved to form windows on top of its leaves. So what happens when it rains or when there's water available, the leaf swells up and the tip of the leaf appears above the sand, and the little window allows sunlight to shine down into the plant underground where it's safe from the elements. And then the moment it becomes dry, the leaf shrinks and it simply disappears as if it never existed. And the next picture is how this beautiful plant looks when it flowers. But yeah, sadly, the reality is that not only the world, but my world, my desert environment is changing. The temperatures of the atmosphere in the world that is changing, becoming too high, is having a devastating impact on the fragile desert environment in my part of the world. The following is a very iconic species found in the Kharib Desert. This is called the half-mens, or half-human plant. It's the most iconic species of the Kharib Desert. They've got an average lifespan of up to 200, or an average lifespan of 250 years. Some of them can grow even well longer than that. I took this photo in 2016, and a mere 6 years later, when I went to revisit the population, this is what I found. I cannot begin to explain to you how severe the conditions are where I am from. This is the norm, not only for this species, but for most species within my area. About 80% of the species throughout the Kharib Desert have disappeared within the past about 10, 11 years. We are in the midst of one of the most severe droughts in human memory. To make things worse, there are other challenges which are also causing species to go extinct. This is a graph from the South African Biodiversity Institute showing how the poaching of succulents have been growing since 2019. And this is only amounts of succulents that's been confiscated. Millions of succulents, not only from South Africa, not only from the Kharib Desert, but from the whole African continent, has been illegally exported out of the continent. As an attempt to save some of the species, one of the species specifically most hard hit by poaching is the ones in this photo, which are called Twinkies or little toes, conophytums. Only last year, just for last year, 6 species within this genus have been poached to extinction, which was not endangered at all. It's completely new. But as an attempt to try to save this genus, I've created, together with my wonderful team at South African National Parks, or Richtersveld National Park. By the way, I'm full-time employed by Sandparks. I'm very proud to be standing here with my uniform this afternoon. But I've created a special conservancy, which we call the conophyta mouse, where we are growing the species genetically as pure as possible, with the idea in the future that when this poaching pandemic has passed, that we can start working on reintroducing the species back into nature where they belong. And it's a race against time because they are disappearing very, very alarming quickly. This is a single bust of the police of succulents, and it's from a single habitat. The unfortunate thing about the succulents, there are many of them that the whole population, the whole distribution of the species is as big as half of this stage. Which means if a poacher discovers it, within a few hours, a species can be extinct from nature. And even worse, the plants in this photo, some of them are several hundred years old, even older than 500 years. When they remove them and they bring them to the northern hemisphere, they don't survive. It's fewer than 10% that survive. It's such an absolute waste. And then for the past 100 years, the area has been suffering immensely under mining, specifically for diamonds. So even though the Richtersveld or the Kharib Desert area is very rich in biodiversity, it's also extremely rich in minerals. And that's become the curse of the area, because people want minerals or need the minerals. Mines can be small, some mines as small as only 10 hectares, but because of the harshness and the sensitivity of the landscape, a single tiny mine like that, the secondary impact, the movement of sand, the movement of dust can stretch over tens of thousands of hectares, killing everything around it. And then the unthinkable thing that's happened in my part of the world over the past 100 years, also because of mining, the displacement or the unjustified removal of people from their traditional people from their land for minerals, for diamonds, have caused immense overgrazing of livestock. A lot of the Nama people in the Richtersveld are now like squeezed into, I will keep it there, have been squeezed into very small areas where there's a lot of overgrazing happening. And as a result of all of these human-induced impacts and the drought that we are experiencing, this is a satellite image from NASA, and the Kharib Desert right at the moment are literally being blown into the Atlantic Ocean. It is disappearing. This absolute global hotspot. I forgot to mention this. It's actually the most biodiverse arid region on Earth. And no one knows this, and it's disappearing. I was born in 1988, and during that time, only 12 species, this is only showing for plants, only 12 species of plants was listed on the red list of South Africa as species of conservation concern or being endangered. And as you can see, by 2023, already 336 species are now endangered. And within the next few years, with new developments that's starting, more species will go extinct. and no one knows what's happening with other forms of life, such as reptiles, birds, spiders, and insects. These are some of the new species I've discovered. I've discovered so many new species I've lost count within this desert environment of mine. And at the same time that I'm discovering species, I'm also witnessing species going extinct. And it is really difficult, and I really, really need the world's help. I need people to help me. I'm the only one working up in this desert environment that's permanently based there. And it's become, over the past 6 months, especially with the things going on around me, there were so many times that I wanted to give up. And if it wasn't for this award, I wouldn't have had the hope to continue. And I am so, so thankful for, and I can't tell you enough how thankful I am. One of the facilities I've established is this greenhouse, which I gathered funding, or I sameld geld in, I don't know how you said it in English, I think I gathered funding to rescue over 100,000 succulents that's been confiscated by police. And it's now available, or it's open for the public to come and visit and see. And we are using this material now to restore species back to the environment. All of my life I've dedicated to studying the flora of the Gharib Desert. I started when I was 11 years old, and by the age of 14 I started to compile this book. It's not published yet. I'm hoping to do that somewhere next year. But this book has become something that's crucial for this area, and I'm hoping that through this lifetime's work of mine, like the late Madiba or President Nelson Mandela said, knowledge is power. So by making this area people aware, by showing people the beauty of the flora or the succulents of this region, I'm hoping that people would be more interested in conserving this area. One of the biggest challenges, and one of the things every time when it comes to conservation challenges that I'm constantly told, are the economy or people. People are more important than environment. The economy is more important than environment. And I would like to share this quote. If you really think the environment is less important than the economy, try holding your breath while counting your money. Even though it's difficult, even though it's rough working, I'm actually, taxonomy is my specialty, and more than 80% of the past 4 years of my life have just been about fighting poaching and the destruction mining are doing to my environment. But for 21 years, I visited this very, very rare species. It doesn't have a local name. The locals don't even know it exists. It's called Namakwanula bruce bayeri. And for 21 years, this was all that I've been seeing. I never got this plant in flower, but I continued. I kept on visiting the population until April 2020, when I finally found it in flower. And this was a very, very emotional moment in my life, because this flower didn't flower just to look beautiful. It flowered because it thought of the future. That is the purpose of this flower, and this gives me hope. This is why nature gives me hope. And this event, being here, it gives me hope that there is a future for our environment, and we are part of that environment. Now, so from the depth of my heart, I want to say thank you to the Future for Nature Foundation, the Royal Burger Zoo, for this amazing time. I mean, we've been spoiled like you cannot believe it. The food has been fantastic. I love the weather in the Netherlands. The cold, I want to get in as much as possible of the cold. I'm hoping for more rain. It's the best weather on earth. But yeah, thank you out of my heart. Thank you out of my heart to Sandparks, to Sandby. I mean, there's so many people. My family for supporting me. My sister, my younger sister that's here with me, holding my hand through this. It's been an absolute amazing journey. Thank you. Thank you, Saba.
Well, you saw the wind that was tearing the Gharib Desert into the ocean. But there is another wind, the east wind, that also pummels the west coast of Africa. And that is what takes us now, hurls us up over the Congo forest to Ghana, where we go and visit Caleb Ofori-Boateng, who has discovered another new species of frog. And he's called it the Afia birago puddle frog, after his mum. And the presence of this critically endangered amphibian in the Atewa Range forest in Ghana has helped to get this forest recognized as an Alliance for Zero Extinction site, which means that the Atewa forest is now a no-go area for mining, which protects all of the wild species living there, including this tiny frog and its puddles. Well, now we hop across quickly to Nigeria, which is just a mere hop for an African fruit bat, to see our friend Iroro Tanshi and her field team. Now, Iroro has been spending the last while crawling through caves, and after a considerable amount of effort, has finally confirmed that there is a population of short-tailed roundleaf bats inhabiting the limestone caves in southern Cross River National Park, 10 years after photographic evidence suggested that this might be so. It is apparently a total game changer for their conservation efforts, and we're delighted by her happy news. So the birds of Europe come to Africa to overwinter, and now they circle high up into the sky in a final farewell to all of our friends in Africa, saving lions and crocodilians, primates, dugongs, and seabirds, and we travel back up to Europe in anticipation of the summer, to Ukraine, where we meet our final winner, Alona Prylutska. Now, Alona spent her childhood in the country with her beloved grandmother when she went on holiday, where her natural affinity for animals was nurtured by tending the family's chickens and goats. But having devoured books by the likes of Gerald Durrell and Joy Adamson, she had very adventurous daydreams, studying brown bears in the Carpathian Mountains, armor leopards in Asia, any large predator that she could think of, really. But one day, a trip to the Amur region actually materialized, and all of a sudden, it was just too much. Alona discovered, to her surprise, that she was a bit of a homebody, and she actually rather liked staying close to her familiar roosting site. Well, it was when she went to university and started going out on natural history field trips that she met her first bat. And this triggered an unexpected passion that roared suddenly into life. Although Alona might occasionally fold her bat wings around herself, she has the heart of a lioness. In the devastating face of war in Ukraine, where men on the streets, up to the age of 60, are now being press-ganged into military service and causing terrible anxiety amongst the women that their husbands, their brothers, their fathers might suddenly disappear, Alona has continued her work, night and day, trying to improve the situation for her beloved bats. I'm going to let her tell you the rest of her story. But Alona, you are hugely deserving of this prize. Welcome.
Thank you, Saba. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's so lovely to be here, to stay on this stage. I came from Kharkiv, my city, my home city. It's one of the biggest cities in my country, with a population of 1.5 million people, situated in the northeastern part of Ukraine, just in 30 kilometers from the Russian border. From a young age, I was inspired by nature and animals. I dreamed of being a zoologist. But my first opportunity to get closer to wild animals, was entering a young naturalist club at my home city's Kharkiv Zoo, where I've been volunteering with keepers of zoo taking care of wild animals. After that, I had no doubts that I want to study biology at the university and save endangered animals. I first met bats during my university field practice when we were capturing bats at night with mist nets. You can see it, rather thin. And I was, for monitoring purposes, we do that. Holding bat in my hand, I was amazed how tiny they were, how fragile their wings were, and how rapidly their heart beats like a tiny drums. I was thrilled by these small nocturnal animals. They have 5 fingers, as we do, and very thin skin stretched between bones of their wings. They navigate in full darkness using echolocation, and they hunt insects, and they play a very important role in our ecosystems. And actually, they are our heroes of yards and gardens and fields, protecting us and playing very important role in ecosystem services, as well as pollination and seed dispersal in tropics. 28 species found in Ukraine are listed as endangered animals. 15 years ago, I decided to study their distribution and ecology. So I spent hundreds of nights staying awake in forests capturing bats for my master's and PhD research. One of the most exciting discoveries for me was capture of great noctule bat, which you can see on photo. It's one of the, actually it's the largest European species. And we discovered it during our research expedition to the Chernobyl exclusion zone, area of nuclear disaster, but nowadays it's incredible wildlife area. I won't hold bat like that anymore. I just want to show you how big it is, the biggest European bat. Over the past 30 years, one of the most common bat species, the noctules, had changed their wintering range because of climate changes. They, during the summer, they roosted in tree hollows marked by green in this area, but moving to the southward marked in blue. But currently they stay for wintering in our country because winters gets warmer. And they started hibernate in buildings with cave-like openings that remind them of natural habitat. Unfortunately, urban areas have a lot of traps, sometimes lethal for bats. In Ukraine, we have such a double frame windows which used for insulation and ventilation. But the thing is that when people forget to close such windows, bats looking for their roots during the migration, they fly inside it and get stuck between windows frames, and without help, they die. It can be up to 100 bats in one of such window. Imagine you found 1,000 bats in your balcony or under your window in the crevice. What would you do? People are afraid of bats, so sometimes they wall them up inside these crevices. Or sometimes they even want to help, but they put them into one box. And bats are very sensitive to temperatures. People thought that they are cold, but actually they are not. And because of this overcrowding, it makes them overheat and they die rapidly from that. One time I got got a call from workers of one of the building placed in my city. They've been making renovation of the windows and they found hibernating beds. And scared of them, they throw them away like garbage to the freezing ground. When I arrived, all beds had died and someone had been crushed by cars. I was so desperate and furious that I had to do something with these vulnerable animals. For successful hibernation, beds need enough fat reserves and stable cold temperature. They decrease their body temperature from 38 degrees all the way down to 5 degrees above zero. So I started to hand feed found beds at home. Actually, it's my kitchen. And keep them for hibernation in my fridge. So my fridge became my first bed sanctuary for 200 beds. Later, I launched a helpline, actually my cell phone, and started receiving calls from all about bed-human interaction in urban areas. Firstly from my city, then from all across Ukraine, and then the scale grew to reports from the other countries. I had no idea of the scale of this problem, but of course the problem is urbanization and urban beds. Up to now, we have more than 5,000 calls. My rescue of beds at home, of course, attracted attention of media, and almost all Ukrainian TV channels came to my home to see my fridge. But eventually it leads for support of local zoo, and together with my colleagues, we established Bed Rehabilitation Center, which is the only in Ukraine. I started rehabilitating 200 beds at home, but now I'm here representing my team, working day and night, protecting beds with me. Now we have up to 3,000 beds per year from all around the country. And in addition, we have 8 fridges for their hibernation. During the summer, I receive such bed babies. They are very cute, aren't they? So we hand feed them and release back to wild. And now we have opportunity to treat injured beds. And actually, our veterinarian is the only one in the country who has this experience and treating these animals. They need a lot of care, so we invite volunteers to help feed our weekend beds during the winter time and discover the exciting facts of their biology. Gradually, I built up a network of bed volunteers in different cities of Ukraine, accumulated our experience into special book. It calls Guideline for Bed Rescue and Rehabilitation. So anyone can start rescue and rehabilitate beds at their home, in their fridges. So all my methodology is placed in this book, but I hope with the help of Future for Nature Award, I will translate it to English. I'm sure that people's attitudes towards beds, towards peaceful coexistence with beds in urban areas can change a lot. That's why I launched an advocacy campaign organizing hundreds of lectures, events, TV shows, and programs. Moreover, we built a unique circular aviary for beds. We call it Bed Collider, but actually beds do not collide inside it. We train our beds to fly either after treatment or baby beds, and also we use it for our outreach activities. But one of the most exciting our events is the Bed Release Fest, which we've been organizing for 10 years with a lot of public and media attention. Usually it's so popular so that hundreds of people come to handle a bed and release it back to the wild. Seeing a live bed on your hand is the most powerful tool to stimulate positive attitude towards beds and towards all wild animals living in urban environment. In 2021, we organized this event in 4 Ukrainian cities, and together with people, we released back to the wild 3,000 bats. And in general, for the past 10 years, we saved more than 20,000 bats of 14 species. But just 1 year later, on 24th of February, the war burst in our lives. Russia invaded our country. A lot of bats that were hibernating in such buildings of different cities, but this photo is made in Kharkiv, they died as well as people when they were bombed. The first months were incredibly complicated. We were stunned and confused, and everything was terrible. Even though we feared for our lives, we couldn't let our bats die. As Anthony de Saint-Exupéry said, "You've become responsible forever for what you've tamed." That's why, on the first day of the war, my colleague built a self-release cage for 2,000 bats. Video. So they can escape independently of us, because we were worrying about electricity shortages and all our 8 fridges. We were forced to evacuate 1,000 bats hibernating in our bat collider because it appeared on the front line, and now around it a lot of mines. We moved back to the home office with weakened and injured bats, and together with my team, we continued to rescue bats from window traps and abandoned flats during their migration. Last year, we did our bat release festival on our own, with no people and no cameras, but with sound of war sirens in the city. No matter what, with the help of Future for Nature, we will continue raising awareness about bats in urban areas in different cities of Ukraine, changing people's minds toward peaceful coexistence with wildlife. Our armed forces are fighting for our country, and we are fighting against destruction of our nature, for bats and their future. We believe both in victory and the success of our bat conservation work. We need to fight for our nature and never give up. I want to thank so much Future for Nature Foundation and board for appreciation and support of my project. Thank you so much.
Three incredibly powerful stories from 3 very different parts of the world. And of course, it's been a joy during this event to touch souls across the world with our growing Future for Nature family. And you can see from this map how widespread the network has now become, embracing each continent like a giant, compassionate octopus. And this is where we are now. Not a biodiversity hotspot, but the country that's home to the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court. It's where our values of freedom and democracy are upheld, and it's where ecocide may one day, and I hope this is sooner rather than later, be recognized by the International Criminal Court as a 5th major international crime. Because we need everybody we can get on board to fight for the environment, like Alona said, bringing as wide a skill set to the table as possible. Which is why I'm now delighted to introduce our guest of honor, Pavan Sukhdev, who is the founder and CEO of Just Impact, a company dedicated to showing how business can have an impact for a better world. Pavan is a scientist by education, an international banker by training, and an environmental economist by passion. Years of work in sustainability and the invisible economics of nature led him to being appointed to head the United Nations Green Economy Initiative and to lead the TEEB report on the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity. Pavan was awarded a McCluskey Fellowship by Yale University in 2011, where he also taught a graduate course on TEEB and wrote his book called Corporation 2020, Transforming Business for Tomorrow's World. He's won several other awards for his work, including the Blue Planet Prize in 2016 and the Tyler Prize in 2020, and we are simply delighted to have him here today and to be able to listen to his unique perspective. Welcome.
Thank you, Saba, and thank you to these three inspiring and wonderful young people. And thank you to the Future for Nature group for all the fantastic work that you've been doing over the last 15 years and even before that. It's my privilege to be addressing you, but I'm blown away. I'm blown away firstly by the love that each of you have shown for nature, for the species or for the biome that you are looking after yourselves. And secondly, I see in you the fight, the willingness to fight. And yes, I know it can be very, very difficult at times, and that you may want to give up, but don't. Because we are all in this together. This is a room full of people who love, like you love, nature, but also respect and admire what you have done. So stay with the fight and keep that love burning inside you. My own journey in this space has been long and winding, as thank you, Saba, for painfully describing the three backgrounds from which I come, which is actually physics, and then after that economics and finance, and then finally externalities, which is where the two collide, the two worlds collide, nature and the economy. And I chose to work in that space because I felt a bridge needed to be built. But my inspiration is the same as yours. As a child, I was inspired by the tiger. My parents would, if I was good, take me to the Delhi Zoo where we lived. And the Delhi Zoo is a little bit like this zoo. Sort of this place outside reminded me that feeling of space, because the Delhi Zoo has got an ancient fortress behind it, about 300-400 years old. And then all the animals are arranged in various compounds, not cages, but compounds, and there are a few cages for the majesty of the tiger, because for that you do need some containment. The tiger fascinated me, the tiger scared me, and I used to feel disturbed when I found the tiger, because they wouldn't be allowed into the open area, their big cage. They were sometimes kept in this small sort of container space where they would be fed. And when they were not fed, they would pace up and down. It was like a wave, it was like a powerful black and orange wave moving and beating from one end of that cage to the other. It was just like a force. And I was just mesmerized. I just couldn't stop thinking and feeling that movement. And feeling the sadness of this animal that is so powerful, can bring down an Indian bison. It's called a gaur. I have some of those in my organic tea plantation, which I try and manage long distance. But yes, a gaur was brought down, we believe, by a tiger, because it's the only thing that can bring down an animal that is 1.8 tons in weight. And this was in this cage. This image, this power remained in my mind and my heart for many, many years, decades, and came back suddenly. The love for nature came back when my first daughter was born, Mahima, who, by the way, is married to a young Dutchman. And suddenly nature came back, and then again the tiger was haunting me. And I decided I need to do something, and I realized the problem is the way we operate our economies. Because no tiger, no creature can survive without the habitat. And you've seen in South Africa, Pieter, you've seen, Thomas, your forests being cut down and what that does to raptor populations. And Alona, you've seen what war can do to nature. If you destroy habitats, you destroy the species. And the habitat of the tiger was the forest. And I realized that a forest standing is worth a lot more to us as human beings. We value these things internally, like as human beings. But we don't bring that value anywhere into the decisions that are made by politicians for national policies, nor by the decisions made by chief executives or chief finance officers when they're running their companies. So the love that we feel for nature, the power that we see, the beauty that we so dearly cherish, and that we value as human beings, because valuation is a human institution, none of that value, none of that valuation gets reflected in the policies and the business practices of our governments and our companies. And yet, it is the government's policies and the actions of the business that determine the direction of our economy and our planet. 2/3 of the economy is private sector. In the US, it's 74%, gross value added, and jobs 75%. But if such a large part of the economy is basically moving in this direction, whereas in fact, to conserve nature, you move in that direction, it's obvious that you will lose nature. My dear friend and I would say guru, Professor Edward Barbier, who was one of the precursors of the TEEP, he used to say that we use nature because she's valuable. We lose nature because she's free. And what he was trying to explain was that nature provides so much of value into our lives every day, what we call nature's contributions to people or ecosystem services, those economists amongst you. But those are invisible. And it is this invisible economics of nature that needs to become visible. That doesn't mean buying and selling nature. That just means explaining to policymakers and CEOs in the language of economics which they understand that what you are destroying, public wealth, public goods, valued by people, valued by all of us, cherished by us, is not to be destroyed because you are losing values. You are pretending to make profits for your shareholders. You are destroying value for your stakeholders. That's not an okay equation to be running. That was my key message, and that was the TEEB reports and so on. But coming full circle, what I've realized that you can have all the proof, economic proof in the world. The report, Saba, that you mentioned, the Green Economy report, we put in a very bold, when I say we, I'm talking about a team of more than 200 ecologists and economists and scientists and people from finance. We put in a very sort of thorough model of the economy and demonstrated how if we invested just 2% of global GDP differently, and I'm saying invest, I mean invest, not donate. It was not about donating. It was not about charity. It was about investing in 12 different sectors of the economy which are going to drive change, such as renewable energy, energy efficiency, resource efficiency, sustainable forestry, sustainable agriculture, and so on, sustainable fisheries. If we did that, in other words, only 1/10 of the total so-called gross capital formation that takes place globally, if that were to be invested differently, that could change the economy to one in which, instead of destroying forests and destroying wetlands and destroying wildlife and losing what we value, we could in fact increase the average forest area per person over 5, 10, 20, and 40 years. We worked all this out in terms of the economic case for this. The proof is sitting there. Numerous other economists who didn't believe us have tried to disprove us, and they have failed, right? Because it's all in the public domain. All the calculations are available. This was in 2010. We are in 2023. 13 years later, nothing has changed. At least, well, not a lot has changed. So a few countries have actually responded and are making a few changes here and there, but marginal. And why does this happen? 2 reasons. One, the obvious one, is that there are still vested interests, so that as soon as a new policy is being changed, which says stop the mining here because it's destroying a beautiful for an area of desert which has so many species, then the mining interests will try and mess around with the policies and try and push the governments and the politicians to change that, and then you will lose it. So there's vested interest that is working against you. But equally, what is not working for you is the wave of passion that you and I feel when we see and behold nature, when we see and behold a beautiful species, a flower that hasn't been there for 21 years, or beautiful bats which are living there in a city environment which need to be defended. When you see these things and the feeling that you feel, that is simply not being channeled into a force against the change that is happening, which none of us want. So we are observing, we are sort of doing what we can individually, but there is no force and there's no movement. And I think the absence of a global movement in defense of nature is what I feel is the second big reason why we are still losing what is actually the most valuable for us, which is the beauty and the joy of observing species, of observing nature in all her wonder and all she provides. Everything that you three young people have done are adding the force to the argument that I believe can not only cut in their pathway the vested interests who want to destroy nature, but you are also helping to create the movement, which I think will finally change the mindsets and change the psyche of human beings to one which is positive towards nature, to one which automatically seeks to defend, seeks to protect, seeks to preserve for the future generations, and does not harm instead. The idea that you can somehow look up to chief executives because they've made great profits for shareholders whilst destroying value for stakeholders, such as future generations, such as governments, such as their suppliers and their buyers, that idea is dead in the water. And it's the old model of the economy. The new model has to be one of stakeholder thinking and not shareholder thinking. It's got to be one where you are conserving all value that human beings perceive, no matter whether an economist like me is willing to put some numbers to value it or not. But if you perceive it, that's value, and that needs to be respected. And that respect has to translate into the actions of policymakers and of governments, and also of the companies who are empowered to deliver goods and services for us. That kind of world, my friends, is the world that we all seek. But the work that you have done, the protection that you have provided to the biomes or to the species that are close to you, you called, Tomás, you called the eagles that you work for the spirits of the forest. And indeed, to me, the spirit is the right word, because these are the signature species which totally make our hearts soar when we see that bird in all its power and its glory. So these are the things that will inspire. This inspiration is, I think, the germ of the change that needs to happen in the human psyche to create that movement where simply doing the things that are accepted today for an economy, for an economic purpose, or for a profit purpose are not acceptable anymore. We are not in a world today where we take women and tie them to a stake and burn them, because they are a witch, right? We are not in that world, right? We can change. We are not in a world which believes that, oh my gosh, if you go too far away across the Atlantic, you'll fall off the edge. No, because the earth is round. We are not in that world anymore, right? So we have changed our mindsets. This is the new mindset change that we have to all work towards. Every species that you protect, every biome, every ecosystem that you protect is a force in the opposite direction to the disaster of planetary boundaries to which we are all heading inexorably. So please, continue what you do. Right? I'm grateful to the Future for Nature group for having brought me here. I just want to, with my heart, thank you three and tell you that you all totally deserve the prizes that you have got. Use them well, but also use us, your community, your network. We are there for you. Thank you.
That was a truly inspiring talk. I think one of the best we've ever had here by a guest of honor. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to put you in my pocket and take you to Kenya. And then you can go to where he is, and then all the rest. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've now almost come to the end. We've got one very exciting thing to do, which is the prizes. And I forget it every year, and I almost did just now. So can I please invite our wonderful Chilean up onto the stage, and give him a prize for his eagles and his mountain forests and his spirit. And straight after that, Pieter from the Gharib Desert. Please come to the stage.
Well done. Well done. Keep up the good work.
And last but far from least, our warrior from Ukraine.
Superb. Well done. Keep it up. Keep it up.
Would you stand over there? Well, ladies and gentlemen, that now does come to the end of our program. And thank you all so much for coming here and supporting these incredible champions who really are changing the world. Please do tell people about this incredible award. Please do come back again next year and bring people with you. Everybody needs to know about Future for Nature and they need to get involved. If you've not yet committed yourself one way or another, do so today. Join hands with us. Bring us friends, make us contacts, donate to this incredible cause, support these extraordinary young people wherever they are in the world. Your donations will go straight to the next generation of extraordinary young conservationists. In a moment, I'd like to invite you all to head out of that door over there to go and have a drink next door and to celebrate their wonderful activities. Please have a look at the merchandise stand. If there's anything you'd like to buy to give as a gift, it all helps and goes in the right direction. And then I must invite, please, the people who know who they are to come up onto the stage for photographs. And we will all be joining you shortly in the area just next door. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. It's been wonderful to have you all here today.